Welcome to this bonus episode of the Creative Community Podcast. David here, as always, joined this time around by my lovely wife, Tabitha, and my very good friend, Anna. Anna, we go as far back as 2010, maybe. Maybe we met in communication class around that time.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Because I gave a speech that was very personal to me, and the feedback I got from you specifically was, why does this matter to me?
I was hoping you would tell that story. I
didn't know this story.
But more importantly, I was in your wedding. So
okay. Yeah, that's great. But I was just trying to say, like, we knew each other before that point in time, because you knew my wife before that point in time. You guys go way back. And then Tabitha, I've known you probably since around 2011. So I think I've known Anna longer, but we're here to talk about round one of the Destination Arete March Madness Bracket Challenge. And this year's category is fictional characters from books specifically. I wanted Tabitha and Anna to join me because you both are prolific readers and you both have strong opinions about the books that you read. And Anna has been on the podcast before, way back in the dark ages of the podcast. She was gracious enough to come on and talk about acting, I think it was. And then Tabitha has been the biggest supporter of the podcast since day one. So I'm very excited to have both of you here. And I just wanted to hear from you guys, maybe before we get into recapping everything. How did you feel about this bracket? What were the emotions that you felt when you read through the list of characters, like as we were revealing them that last week of February? Tabitha, what did you think? I know you were involved in the selection process, so you had strong opinions, but what was your emotions, I guess, is the question.
Well, yes, I had strong opinions. I did have foreknowledge of what was coming, but I feel like the things that I had strong opinions about were heard. So some things like taking Hiccup out didn't happen, but things like putting Matthew Cuthbert in did. And I feel more strongly about that than I did the other thing. So I'm good to go. My favorite book characters are included. Pretty much all of them are included on here. So I'm a happy camper. Awesome. Now, when you fast forward to the way that things are going, I do have staunch opinions about how people don't know what they're talking about, but we can go there later when you ask me about that.
Okay. Anna, was there anyone that you felt like should have been included that didn't get included? Do you have a fictional character in your mind that you're like, oh, why didn't they include this person? Or do you feel like we represented kind of a good enough?
There are books that I enjoy and that I like to revisit, but are not universal enough to be, that everybody would know who that person is. So I feel like as far as like well-known characters, most of my favorites are present.
Well, let's just start with the region that finished first. It was our Sir Arthur Conan Doyle region. And for our listeners, I'm going to read off the results, and then I'm going to ask Tabitha and Anna a couple questions here, and I'll share some of my stuff too. But Sherlock Holmes beat Captain Ahab soundly, 140-11. And I want to note these numbers are going to jump up the next day because we didn't have the blog voting working the first day. But Stuart Little upset Jay Gatsby in the 8-9 matchup, 98-48. Aslan beat Hawkeye from Last of the Mohicans, 141-15, another blowout. This is one of the close ones. Charlotte from Charlotte's Web was a 13 seed, beat number 4 Percy Jackson 76-73 by 3 votes. I think Twitter decided that matchup. And then Emma Woodhouse was a 3 seed, beat Frank Hardy 97-53. Edmund Dantes was an upset, beat Scarlet O'Hara 82-59. The Cat in the Hat was a 7 seed, beat Junie B. Jones 86-69. And then Homer Price was the 2 seed, beat John Galt 94-22. So Anna, what result from that set of 8 matchups was there one that surprised you? Like, well, I didn't expect that one to win.
I mean, now that I am reviewing it back over, I'm surprised that Charlotte beat Percy. I mean, I know it's a very sentimental story, but her lifespan was short. And
here we go again. Don't be hating the people who die in the books.
But you could say that she gave her life for another. Like she saved Wilbur's bacon.
Well,
like,
but
literally,
she was going to be making webs anyway.
But she used them for a greater good, like a common cause. Like, what does Percy Jackson do besides be really whiny?
That is fair. I don't know. I guess he saves the world or whatever. It's been a while.
Okay. Well, maybe she saved a pig. He saved the world. They can't be compared.
The world. Yeah. I mean, what is Wilbur's ultimate fate? You know, when he gets old and he's not a prize pig anymore.
There's no cure for that. So
there's cured bacon.
Yeah, you got it. Tabitha, did you have any of these results from today that surprised you?
I was very happy to see Jay Gatsby just stomped into the ground. I do not care for him at all. He's a bad person. So
he's not great.
No. So I was very happy about that. Actually, when you read out all the ones that won, I didn't necessarily pick them in my own bracket, every single one, but I can't disagree with them because the ones that beat the ones that I had winning, they were situations like the Cat in the Hat over Junie B. Jones, where I was a little bit torn. That was a tough one for me because I love Junie B. Jones. So I had chosen Junie B. Jones. But I mean, how influential is Dr. Seuss?
But is it Dr. Seuss or is it the Cat in the Hat?
Well, that's true. But
right. Does the Cat in the Hat represent the whole of Dr. Seuss's characters in this bracket? Because we didn't include the kid that saw everything on Mulberry Street, and we didn't include the fox in the box with the rocks and the socks. Like we didn't include the Grinch. Like the Grinch is not in this bracket.
I'm looking and I don't think there's any other Dr. Seuss's. So in my mind, it was like the Dr. Seuss pick. So I was okay with that, is what I'm trying to say. I think in that particular bracket, I'm good. I can be okay with those. I have other opinions about the other brackets.
You guys ever read Stuart Little?
Oh yeah, it's up here.
Okay.
On top of Charlotte's Web.
Oh, on top of Charlotte's Web.
Yeah, it's a 3-set. I've got the Trumpet of the Swan, which is the better of the 3 books.
E.B. White love there. Well, okay, so I grew up on the movie, right? A classic in and of itself. And I read Stuart Little for the first time last year. Very different.
Yeah.
and I you know, I'm not above saying this. I like the movie better.
I'm rethinking my invitation to have you on this.
I read it and I told Charlotte about it and I was like, this is strange. The strangest thing for me was that like his family, there was no mention of him being adopted. It was just like, oh, my whole family's taller than me. And I was like, and a few other differences. It's weird that we're not addressing that.
But see, I think that's the beauty of E.B. White is that, like, have you ever read Trumpet of the Swan?
No, but I do have it.
He just plays the trumpet and just goes to town. And like the world that E.B. White creates is a world that doesn't need for kids to understand that sometimes if one member of the family looks different from the others, there's a process where their parents and like E.B. White's just like, here's this world, live in it. You know, like, here we go. We have a mouse that lives with this family. It's kind of like Paddington, except for Paddington does the whole, they had to adopt him thing. So he's not in this bracket. How did he get left off? That is a travesty.
Who made this bracket? I don't know.
I take full responsibility for leaving him off. I cannot believe I did that. So the second region was the Milne region, which is named after the author of Winnie the Pooh. So I'll read out the winners here, the 8 matchups. Winnie the Pooh just destroyed Buster Kilrain 191-8. The biggest blowout of the entire year so far. And then Piglet defeated the Scarlet Pimpernell somehow 125-78 with his stubby little arms. Nancy Drew beat Pilgrim from Pilgrim's Progress 128-66. Just a bunch of reprobates here. Samwise upset Harry Potter, the 13 seed, beating the 4 123-78. Gandalf, the 3 seed, beat King Arthur 168-30. Not really a problem there. Mr. Tumnus upset Hazel from Watership Down 155-42. Big sad. Mary Poppins beat Madeline 163-39. And then Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy beat Jennifer, the Best Loved Doll 172-9. So Tabitha, any surprises in that bracket? I got one wrong in the last bracket and one wrong in this bracket. So I wanted to know if there were anything that surprised you with this result.
Anna and I guarantee you, feel the exact same way about Piglet defeating the Scarlet Pimpernel. That's insane, because the Scarlet Pimpernel is like the best book. And if you haven't read it, you need to read it.
Yeah, our whole discussion of this portion of the bracket is just going to be a shameless promotion for, if you haven't read the Scarlet Pimpernel, you have not lived.
Seriously. So I was kind of surprised that Piglet had beaten the Scarlet Pimpernel. I love Piglet just like the next person, but the Scarlet Pimpernel is, I mean, he literally is the hero of the French Revolution. I mean, come on. You gotta vote for the Scarlet Pimpernel.
He's the OG vigilante. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tabitha, when did you first read the Scarlet Pimpernel? Do you know how old you were?
Senior in high school, maybe.
Was it required reading, or you just read it for fun?
No, I just read it for fun.
What about you, Anna?
I was like 13 or 14, and I read it because my mom had read it and enjoyed it, and I read it and was like, oh my gosh, I love it. I can't tell you how many times I've reread it, and I know we've chatted about how I used that. You know, I spent a semester with that story for my adaptation class in grad school, so we're pretty close. You know, I will say though, I think one thing that grinds my gears a little bit, if we can be transparent here, is why, I mean, okay, I obviously know that it's, you know, the author, that's this whole author of Winnie the Pooh, it's his bracket, but having like 2 characters from Winnie the Pooh, like from the Winnie the Pooh stories. I mean, in the Doyle bracket, there was only Sherlock Holmes, but we have 2 of these characters. So then that made me upset. Tabitha, we were talking about your feelings and I jumped in. Sorry. Why don't you finish and then we'll talk to you. Sorry.
Well, in full disclosure, Anna, we talked about more than these 2 characters from the Winnie the Pooh series, and only these 2 made it in. No. So it could have been worse. We could have been looking at Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, Eeyore, and Tigger. So, so we ended up with Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. I would have chosen probably just to have Winnie the Pooh, but we all love Piglet, so Piglet ended up in there. But
here's the thing. Had Paddington replaced Piglet, do you think the result would have been different? Do you think people love Paddington as much as they love Piglet?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the I
feel
think
like
the story of Winnie the Pooh is such a classic that lasts more than just a phase of your life.
Wow, Paddington's just a phase? Is that what you're about to say?
Yes.
I feel like if I say that, I'm going to get tomatoes thrown at me. But I do feel like it is a little bit more that way than Pooh.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you don't think Paddington would have been underseeded as an 8 seed in the bracket? You think he would have been just fine sitting there? He's not as influential as Pooh.
I definitely don't think he's as influential as Pooh. No.
I will say that I do feel like it's a little unfair that you have like, I mean, Winnie the Pooh, any of those characters, you're just going to have all this nostalgia versus like a classic novel.
Scarlet Pimpernel.
I mean, those are 2 totally different things. And you made us choose. Obviously, I went with the right choice.
Me too.
Yep. I will say though, he didn't make it past round 2 for me, which did surprise me on my bracket, because then he got put up against someone who is of equal and or greater, you know, personal meaning to me. So, but we'll, you know.
Yeah, the hero of the French Revolution, or the hero of everyone's childhood.
But no. But okay, you can throw tomatoes at me if you want. Piglet is not the hero of my
No, I meant Winnie the Pooh. I meant in the next round. Like, Piglet's not the hero of everyone's childhood, obviously. But
I mean, yeah, no. I would Scarlet Pimpernel beat Winnie the Pooh for me.
Okay. Well, here's my one consolation. I put it that way so that we would have to choose a Milne character if they both won, and there would only be one left by the time we got to the Sweet 16. So I foresaw the possibility, because I didn't want Piglet and Pooh to meet in the championship. Like, that would be insane with the other, which I don't think our audience would do that. But the way they voted in the next bracket that we're about to talk about, has me questioning a lot of things. So I'm ready to talk about it now. The Montgomery bracket, so named for the author of Anne Shirley, our 1 seed. She beat Curious George 145 to 59. Dumbledore, the 8 seed, beat Amelia Bedelia 122 to 85. Then Aragorn upset Peter Rabbit, which I had many people upset about how low seeded Aragorn was. And I have one defense. I spent the majority of February thinking that the Aragorn was the dragon Aragon. And not until I was Googling the names to download the pictures did I realize it was the High King of the Fourth Realm, or whatever his name is. So he won 139 to 76. Now, the next matchup we're going to pause on. Gilbert Blythe and Frodo Baggins, a 4 seed and a 13 seed.
How dare you?
Gilbert beat
Anna
Frodo 110 to 105 by 5 points. This is the second closest contest so far. Charlotte only won by 3 points, the spider. How do you guys feel about Gilbert only winning by 5 points over Frodo? And are you happy about this result, or are you upset?
I'm just going to make a prediction here.
Go ahead.
Before Anna goes, I'm going to make a prediction. I don't think we're going to agree. So go ahead, Anna. I think we're going to disagree on this one.
Oh, I might surprise you, because on my bracket, I actually did choose Gilbert.
Okay, I am surprised.
But as we start getting down to final 4, Gilbert is not there, and 3 other Lord of the Rings characters are. So, I mean, Frodo, I love Frodo, but Gilbert is like, if we're getting down to like specific characters, because I love Lord of the Rings, and that's like a whole long conversation we could have.
Sure.
But if it comes down to, because in my mind, I'm initially thinking the story and like the impact that story had to me. And then, but when it comes character to character, I think it's got to be Gilbert. It's not that I don't like Frodo. It's just that you did this, David, and you have to choose which of my loves.
I will say, I am surprised. I thought we were going to disagree on this one because I know Anna loves Lord of the Rings so much. However, of the Lord of the Rings characters that we have in all of these brackets, Frodo is my least favorite. So I voted for several other Lord of the Rings characters along the way, but I did not vote for Frodo.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would have voted for Frodo higher than Gandalf, but that's we already passed that.
Yeah.
We've moved beyond that.
Yeah. Well, the rest of this bracket broke out this way. 3rd seed Ebenezer Scrooge beat Toad from Wind in the Willows. The 11-seeded Robin Hood upset the 6-seeded Tom Sawyer, which I want to come back to that in a second, 136 to 70. Frog from Frog and Toad beat Jim Hawkins. It was a bit of an upset, 109 to 87. And then Peter Pan beat Hiccup 114 to 94, settling that argument once and all. So what I wanted to say about this bracket is 3 of the 8 matchups decided in this tournament. If you win by less than 20, it's usually a close matchup. I'm trying to figure out the best way to show the audience visually, like how the voting went throughout the day. Haven't quite figured that out yet, because I think that would give people even a better idea of like how close it was, because especially Gilbert and Frodo, it went back and forth. Gilbert would be ahead by 3, and then an hour would go by, and Frodo would be ahead by 3, and then another hour. And then overnight, when I got up at 6 a.m. to count the votes, Gilbert had won by 5. But I wanted to go back to Robin Hood and Tom Sawyer. I just don't know why people didn't vote for Tom Sawyer. He's like this seminal American literature figure from Mark Twain. All right. And yet people voted for Robin Hood, who's like, what?
Yeah.
Give me a reason here, Anna. You're obviously very passionate about this.
I will give you a reason, because Robin Hood thinks of other people besides himself. Tom Sawyer is one of the most selfish people you could think of. You know,
that is part of the reason.
I get it. Mark Twain, cornerstone of American literature. However, if we're going to get down to the brass tacks of the character, Tom Sawyer, no.
But wouldn't you say Tom Sawyer if he's this way when he starts the book, he's this way when he ends it. Whereas Robin Hood is this way when he starts the book, and he's just the same.
Oh, you mean like doing good and thinking of other people and continues to do so?
But Tom Sawyer like shows growth and development. Like he goes from caring only about himself to caring about Becky and like making sure that she's taken care of.
Here's the thing, David. Robin Hood is a legend. Tom Sawyer is a child in one story. All right. Who's making numerous adaptations and revisiting and exploring Tom Sawyer?
There's at least 2 movies.
Good.
Actually, isn't Tom Sawyer in Huckleberry Finn as well?
Briefly.
I thought so. So he's technically in 2 books. But honestly,
good for him.
Thank you for supporting him.
I will say this. I agree with Anna. Tom is a very selfish person, and he makes it a little hard to be on his team.
So what this is telling me is you guys not only base whether or not the character could physically win a fight, but also whether or not the character is worthy of receiving your vote.
Yes.
That's what you're basing your voting on.
Well, okay, I should
is...
say the worthiness does come before the fight, but you know, I've been judging based on like nobility or like their virtues. And then if it's like 2 virtuous people, it's like, all right, who do I want on an island with me? Or like, who do I want in a battle? You know, not Tom Sawyer.
Yeah.
Bow and arrow, whitewash, painting the fence.
She has a very good point. And by the way, the physical battle thing, that was Scarlet. That wasn't either one of us.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, I will say that is as I move down in my criteria. That is one tucked away in the back. So in a fight, Robin Hood, hands down.
All right. So our last set of 8 matchups. Elizabeth Bennet, 153 to 31. I was surprised the Ghost of Christmas Present got that many votes. I was literally surprised.
It's the worst ghost.
Yeah, it was very surprising. Jane Eyre.
People are the Jane Austen haters, guaranteed.
Probably.
It's like anyone but Jane.
Yeah.
Jane Eyre, 103 to 74 over Dr. Dolittle. We've got a Jane Austen matchup in the second round already, which we'll come back to. Jean Valjean, which I think we misspelled his name on the bracket, like that we printed out, beat Robinson Crusoe, 102 to 79. And then George Knightley beat Sam Gribley, 124 to 44, which I was sad about. And then Atticus Finch beat Gollum, 110 to 72.
Anyone could beat Gollum.
Well, Gollum got 72 votes. So it didn't take it took the most noble person in the bracket to beat him, but Bilbo Baggins beat Scout Finch. Another interesting thing about this bracket was we had 2 what's that name of that book? To Kill a Mockingbird characters against Lord of the Rings characters, which was odd. Then Huckleberry Finn won 101 to 79 over Ramona Quimby, and then Joe March beat Matthew Cuthbert 116 to 61. Tabitha, do you have anything? Okay, wow. Can't even start. Apparently you guys have strong feelings about something I just said, so one of you take it away. Tabitha, what's the cause for your boos here?
Well, you already know because I voiced my opinion on this before, but I had a conversation about this at a bridal shower today.
Oh.
Matthew Cuthbert is one of the most influential people in the Anne of Green Gables series.
Thank you.
Even though he does die early, he like sets the scene and the tone for the entire series. He lays the foundation with Anne and establishes that relationship with her that she so desperately needs to become the woman that she becomes, and to have the impact on all of the lives that you see her impacting throughout her books. Matthew is part of the reason that she is who she is. Doesn't matter that he died so early. He instilled some of those really important principles in her, even though he was so quiet. And that's what makes him such an important character, is he was still important even when he was gone.
To add to that, yes, 5 stars. If it wasn't for Matthew, would Marilla have kept Anne?
Exactly.
And then we wouldn't have had the whole rest of the series.
Yes. Yes.
And I just have, okay, I'm gonna say something very controversial.
I doubt it.
I don't like Jo March.
I don't either.
Little Women. Oh my gosh, it's not controversial. It's like, what another surprise. She agitates me to no end. And also, like, I don't really like Little Women. Have I seen most of the adaptations? Yes. Did I grow up with the story? Sure. But I just, all of the sisters irritate me in their own unique way.
So would you say Little Women is a really good example of like what it's like to be in a family though? Like there's a lot of like differences between personalities and clashes and conflict.
Sure, but there are tons of other books that demonstrate what it's like to be in a family.
And I think part of what makes them, because I'm totally with you, I've never really loved Little Women at all. It's okay, but I've never loved it. It's not one of my favorites. But I think the reason that they're a little irritating, all of them, is because whatever their weakness is, they take it to the extreme.
They're stereotypes almost.
Yeah. And it's like, seriously? Yeah, I'm totally with you on that.
All right, so I want to know your guys' predictions. I want to hear what your bracket looks like for the Sweet 16. So there'll be 4 characters left in each region by Thursday of this coming week. This episode airs Monday. So by Friday morning, there'll be 4 characters in each region left, 16 total.
Okay.
So do you have anything that might surprise us? Or I'm going to just start the Montgomery region. I literally only got Anne Shirley and Peter Pan right as far as guesses. Every single other person that advanced, I got wrong. I am completely.
Did you vote for Peter Rabbit over Aragorn?
Yeah, because I thought that it was Aragon the dragon for 5 weeks. I need to reiterate this.
You made this. You made this.
I left Paddington off. Okay, so I take
that is apples to oranges. Not what we're talking about.
But I think the one thing that I think will happen is I think that all of the Lord of the Rings characters left, which I'm seeing there's only 2, they will all advance. And then I also think that I think it's going to be really, this is a term from March Madness, the basketball version, but it's going to be really chalky. I think the only 1 or 2 seed that doesn't win the next round will be Homer Price. I think all of the rest of the 1s and 2 seeds will advance to the next round. Peter Pan will not beat Frog from Frog and Toad. Anne Shirley will not lose to Dumbledore. Maybe she will. Maybe that one will surprise me. Winnie the Pooh will not lose to Piglet. Darcy will not lose to Mary Poppins. Elizabeth's not going to lose to Jane Eyre. Maybe Jo March will lose to Huckleberry Finn, but I doubt that. Sherlock's not going to lose to Stuart Little.
Well, I don't know why I'm even consulting my sheet because not all of my picks made it.
I know. So, mine too.
You can re-predict though. Like you can change like, okay, so since Aragorn won, I think he will beat Gilbert.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
I feel like he will. I feel like people are very much more fans of Aragorn than they are of Gilbert Blythe.
Boo hiss. How do you feel about that, Anna?
All I'm saying is that Aragorn made it to my final 4 and Gilbert's not there.
Gilbert's not in mine either, but he's only not in mine because he ended up going against Anne Shirley. And so how do you pit Anne and Gilbert against each other? That was really a heartbreaker for me.
You choose Aragorn. That's how you pick. You don't.
Tabitha, any surprises for us as far as your predictions go?
I'm fairly confident in my choices, although I was fairly confident that Matthew would beat Jo March and that the Scarlet Pimpernell would beat Piglet. And apparently people are not as well read as I thought.
Are those the only 2 you got wrong?
No, those are not the only 2 I got wrong, but those are the ones I'm the most upset about.
Yeah, we have to choose Winnie the Pooh over Piglet. So you pitted the 2 of them together.
Right.
You did this.
Yeah.
But
I've done this to people all throughout. I mean, as stated previously, maybe not on the record, Percy Jackson and or no, the Harry Potter and where I can't find it.
Oh,
Harry Potter and Samwise Gamgee.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about that at all? I've had many people bring this up to me. They said Harry got the short end of the stick.
Yeah, because he was pitted against.
Sorry, short end of the wand. Maybe I should have said that.
Yeah, no, you pit him against Samwise, who is like one of the most virtuous characters of all time. And you've got Harry Potter, who's just some kid who happened to be chosen. He didn't choose, he was chosen.
I see the difference here. Samwise chose to stick with Frodo. Harry Potter was just chosen by somebody else.
My sister and I talked about this last night in our conversation, prepping for this conversation. And she was like, "Oh, I picked Harry Potter." And I was like, I picked Samwise. I mean, the whole it wasn't a very lengthy conversation, but I was just like, I mean, Harry Potter, what does he actually do to get, like, things happen to him, like stuff hits the fan and he like reacts to it and he has to make decisions because that stuff is happening to him, but half the time it's really Hermione saving his butt. How much of the story is really Hermione instead of Harry Potter, as opposed to Samwise on Mount Doom physically taking the burden? Apples to oranges again.
Well, here, as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you guys one more thing. Are there any books on here that if people haven't read them, maybe pick one book that you're like, if you haven't read this one, now the Scarlet Pimpernel, you've already made the case.
Oh.
So, I want to give you a chance to promote another book that you've read. So if there's a book on this list, or if there's a book that's not on this list that you want to share with us, Tabitha, do you have one on here that you're like, people need to read this and here's why?
This is one of the matchups that I was going to bring up earlier.
Go for it.
Ramona Quimby versus Huckleberry Finn. I know for a lot of people, that's like not a super personal matchup. Well, it was for me, because Ramona Quimby was a huge part of my childhood. And so when Huckleberry Finn, how much did he beat her by? Do you have those numbers? Wasn't it kind of a lot?
101 to 79. So it was really only about 22 votes. So it was pretty close, actually. And in this bracket, like 20 to 25 is.
That feels offensive to me. Ramona Quimby is very offended. Because I read Huckleberry Finn, and honestly, I understand it was a very influential book, and it was a good book, but Ramona was more like my childhood, where it actually, and I think that's how I made a lot of my decisions.
The nostalgia.
A little bit of the nostalgia factor, and whereas I did read Huckleberry Finn, then it didn't grab a hold of me like Ramona's books did. As far as a book to recommend if nobody's read it, I think of the ones that I think maybe people haven't, I would say Emma, because Emma is actually my favorite Jane Austen book. Of all of the Jane Austen stories, Emma is my favorite. And of all of the Emma characters, I love Emma, but I respect George Knightley the most. Because throughout all of the book, he is only trying to be the best that he can be and make her the best she can be. And he's always supporting her and helping her to become a better person. And so I think everything about that book, it's uplifting. And it's a good example of what a relationship can be. So
I like it. Anna, how about you? Any books you can recommend, like a book from this list that if people haven't read it, here's why. It can be the most popular book on the list too. I don't care.
I really love Jane Eyre, and that's another one that I've read multiple times, and I really love collecting books that are older. Actually, hang on, let me grab it. It's right here. So this is my copy of Jane Eyre, and it's like, I'm all about like the texture of books too, so like this plays into the nostalgia for me. So like it smells like an old book, it's like perfectly weighted, but it's like flexible. Anyway, so I have read this I don't know how many times, and I have heard flack from the naysayers for Jane Eyre, saying that she's like, I don't know, kind of like a pushover, or that Mr. Rochester is like a terrible person. And I think that makes me feel some sort of way, because I think that Jane is an example of a main character who is not fiery, but she is strong. So she's a character who is quiet, and who I think that Charlotte Bronte did a really cool way of like looking into like the internal strength of someone, and like it's a really cool examination of that character. And I think that there's a lot there that people just kind of dismiss. And this isn't a spoiler because this book has been around for how many years, but like the strength of her to be like, no, this is a bad situation, I'm gonna walk away. And anyway, I love it. And sure, it's dark and broody, but then there's like light. And anyway, I love it. It's one of those that I've returned to over and over. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. This is my podcast, so I'm going to quickly talk about My Side of the Mountain. Sam Gribley lost to the Honorable George Knightley, whatever. But My Side of the Mountain was like the first time I ever lived vicariously through a character, because Sam leaves. I don't know if either of you have read it, but Sam leaves home and has to live on the mountain by himself, and has to figure out what he's going to eat, because he only brought so much processed meat from the meat freezer drawer at home, and can't just go down he has some cash, but he can't just go down to the convenience store and buy stuff whenever he wants to. He has to really ration it out. And I think this story was written back when, gum cost 10 cents or whatever. He makes a poor decision by running away from home, but he runs away from a kind of a bad, like crummy situation. I think there's some unfavorable living circumstances with the people in his life, but he still faces the consequences of making that decision. And it just like gets stronger, befriends this hawk. It kills small rodents for him. He has to learn how to cook meat on an open flame. And like, I've just always admired that Swiss Family Robinson style, like, Castaway, like it's either survive or die. And even though he was really only like 3 miles from home the entirety of this book, which that's not a spoiler, he talks about how far he travels in it. My Side of the Mountain is 100% recommended by me. So, guys, any last words before we sign off for this episode of the podcast? This has been awesome. I've loved hearing your opinions and your feelings about these books. This is why I think reading is important, is because it stays with you. Here we are all, several years removed from college, even more years removed from high school, probably 10, 15 years removed from elementary school when we read some of these books. And yet we can still remember them. We can still feel the feelings we felt when we read them. And I don't know if you guys have anything to add on to that or anything like that, but I've had a lot of fun talking about these 64 characters with you.
I mean, we could have a debate all night over like what makes a good book, or like what makes a book a classic. But I think a lot of it ties back into like where you were when you read this book and what time of life you were in, and like the positives and negatives, like, talking about Huckleberry Finn, like, just as an example, if something was required reading, but did that just automatically make you averse to that? Or, for me, getting introduced to Lord of the Rings, like that's a whole other conversation we could have, because that was really special, because I always wanted to like be friends with my older brothers, but I was like the annoying younger sister. So like Lord of the Rings was my brother, like that, like we bonded over that. And so that is part of the reason why that story is so emotional to me, let alone, the music and the cinematography and the books themselves. I mean, we could have a whole Zoom meeting about that. Yeah. But I think that you're right, that reading is just so important. And like the C.S. Lewis characters. And part of the reason why, spoiler, can I tell who my prediction is?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. I was gonna ask you at the very end who you thought was gonna win it all.
I think on my bracket, Aslan wins it all.
Wow.
I was thinking about that, and Tabitha, you and I were talking about this yesterday.
Yeah.
And I recently reread The Horse and His Boy, and the portion or I've listened to it, is this the section where Aslan is telling Shasta, like, I was the lion who protected you when you were, asleep, or I was the lion who did this. I was the lion who pushed you to shore, or whatever. And yeah, there's tons of spoilers in there. So, and like that made me cry, like as an adult. Like as a kid, that was like, oh wow, that's how the story all connects. But like as an adult, I'm like crying in my car. And like I grew up with, my parents would read to us every night.
Mm-hmm.
Like we would read fiction, nonfiction, and we had like a children's Bible that we would read, but it was like clockwork. And that was like the foundation of my childhood. So like Chronicles of Narnia, we did those multiple times. So for me, those books are, just for example, like those books are deeply ingrained into like myself as a person, like because that was such a part of my routine as a child. Like I don't know who I would be without some of these stories. So I mean I just think it's so important to put it very lightly.
I agree with you about that. I think that a lot of my decisions, like I said, were nostalgic, but because of where I was and what point in life I was when those stories were affecting me. And it's funny, you mentioned your parents used to read to you guys every single night. Well, my parents would either read to me, or my dad was a really good storyteller and he would tell me stories. Well, he had this one story that was, he would leave me on the edge of my seat, and it was almost like anticlimactic because now I can't go to sleep because I'm thinking about what's coming next. Fast forward several years later, you know what story he was telling me that I thought he was making up? Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
I was sitting there, and it had just come out, and I was sitting there with my dad watching the movie because I hadn't read the books at this point. And I was like, this is that story that you were telling me when I was a little girl that I thought you had made up.
So can I tell you my Lord of the Rings book story?
Please. I love that it just makes me so happy that we all have like how the Lord of the Rings found us.
So I saw all the movies in high school as they were coming out, or at someone's house, extended edition, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm usually not someone to grab onto a trend. And for some reason at that time they were trending. And I was just kind of like, okay, these are cool. Like I admire the story. But then in college, I was like, I'm so sick of reading this biology textbook. And I went to the library and I pulled it off of the fiction shelf and I sat down on a chair and I read it. And then I put a tiny piece of paper in it, put it back on the shelf, and then went back to class. And then I did that for a whole semester. And that's how I read the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
In the library.
Over the course, because I wanted to get away from my roommates. Like I wanted to get away from my roommates. I didn't have a place to go read. I didn't live in town. So like I just had this little chair in the back of the library near the fiction books at college where I read Lord of the Rings. And that's what that book means to me, was just a chance for me to take a break from school and take an adventure. And it was a wonderful time. So
it finds us all at the right time.
Yes.
And changes our lives.
Anna, where can people follow more of your book adventure?
I have my own Bookstagram account, as we say on the social medias. It's a bookish brown, all lowercase, and there are underscores between each word. And I just posted a reel that you should all check out. I was joking with David earlier that it didn't get many likes, but that's fine, and that's my hubris. But yeah. So I try to post about what I'm reading. For this year, my goal is to do more like actual reviews and recommendations, and would love to reread The Lord of the Rings.
I want to hear from you, Tabitha. Who was your ultimate winner that you picked?
My ultimate winner is very nostalgic. It was Winnie the Pooh is who I chose. Simply because of, nostalgia. That's the whole reason. But in my final four, I had, in my final two, I ended up with Pooh versus Elizabeth Bennet, and that was a tough one for me.
All right. Well, thank you both. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to the rest of this bracket as things break down. Okay. Once again, a very special thank you to Anna and Tabitha for coming on to talk about the 5th annual Destination Arete March Madness Bracket Challenge Fictional Character Edition. It was really great to hear their love for reading, their love for these characters, and what these characters mean to them throughout the years. If you're listening to this on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, the second round is happening right now. You can go and vote. And if you're listening to this in the future, just know that if you want to be involved in more things like this bracket, this storytelling idea, the stories that we love, Destination Arete is the place for that. We have the Creative Community Podcast. We have our webcomic called Launch that will be having more chapters coming soon. All of that you can find on destinationarete.com, our website. Follow us, Destination Arete, Arete, on Instagram and Facebook. The podcast usually releases every other Friday on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, SoundCloud, and we have video episodes on YouTube. And then if you want to be part of our newsletter, we had some newsletter info go out lately that only people on the newsletter know about so far. So if you want to know about that, destinationarete.com/contact or destinationarete, Arete, @gmail.com. Let us know you want to be a newsletter subscriber, and you'll get to find out about pretty cool stuff ahead of everybody else. So this has been David signing off for the Creative Community Podcast. I'll see you guys in a week with a recap of round 2.